The evening rush at Le Petit Jardin was in full swing as Mai hurried through the kitchen doors, balancing 3 plates of steaming French cuisine on her forearm. The rich aroma of fresh herbs and butter sauce filled the air, mixing with the quiet murmur of Manhattan's elite enjoying their dinner. This was her 6th double shift this week, but nobody would have guessed it from her warm smile and graceful movements between the tables. Table 7 needs their wine topped off, she reminded herself mentally, weaving between chairs with practiced ease. The crystal glasses clinked softly as she poured the deep red liquid, her hands steady despite the exhaustion creeping into her bones. A guest caught her eye, and she quickly noted another order for fresh bread, her mind already calculating the quickest route back to the kitchen. At home, her grandmother waited, probably sitting in her favorite armchair near the window, knitting despite her arthritis. The thought made May's heart squeeze a little tighter. The medical bills were piling up, but she refused to let that show on her face. This job at one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants was a blessing, even if it meant spending 12 hours a day on her feet. Between serving courses and clearing tables, May would catch fragments of the live piano music floating through the dining room. The restaurant's regular pianist, an elderly gentleman, played the same classical pieces every night. She knew each note by heart, her fingers sometimes moving unconsciously in her apron pocket, playing along with invisible keys. Not that anyone here knew about her own musical talents. That was a secret she kept close to her heart, along with the acceptance letter from Juilliard's evening program tucked safely in her locker. "Your order, sir," she announced softly, placing a perfectly arranged plate of coq au vin before a business executive. The man barely acknowledged her, too absorbed in his conversation about stock markets. May didn't mind. She had mastered the art of being invisible when needed, yet instantly available when a guest raised their eyes searching for service. In the kitchen, she quickly checked her reflection in the polished surface of a steel fridge. Her long black hair was still neatly secured in a bun, not a strand out of place despite the heat and humidity. Her uniform showed no signs of the sauce that had splashed earlier. She'd managed to dodge it just in time. Presentation was everything at Le Petit Jardin, and she took pride in maintaining the restaurant's high standards. Between tables, she snuck quick glances at her phone, checking messages from the nursing service that helped care for her grandmother. All good today, read the latest text, allowing her to breathe a little easier. The extra shifts were worth it when they meant her grandmother could receive the care she needed while May worked toward her dreams. The dinner service continued its elegant dance. Plates out, plates in, wine poured, water refilled, crumbs swept away. Mai moved through it all with quiet determination, her mind occasionally wandering to the piano pieces she would practice late at night on her electronic keyboard, headphones on to avoid disturbing the neighbors in their small apartment. As the evening wound down, she caught fragments of conversation about an important food critic expected to visit soon. The staff was already on edge about it, but May remained focused on her current tasks. One table at a time, one order at a time. That's how she'd had learned to manage everything life had thrown at her. The night manager stopped her as she gathered empty glasses onto her tray. "You're doing good work," he said simply before moving on to inspect another section of the restaurant. May allowed herself a small smile. In this world of haute cuisine and luxury, she was slowly but surely making her mark, even if nobody knew the full story of who she really was or what she dreamed of becoming. As she finished her shift, the sound of the piano still lingering in the air, May knew tomorrow would bring another long day of balancing plates, dreams, and responsibilities. But for now, she had tips in her pocket that would help with this month's bills and the promise of an hour's practice on her keyboard before bed. In the grand symphony of her life, this was just one movement, and she was determined to play it perfectly. It started like any other Tuesday at Le Petit Jardin. May had just finished arranging fresh flowers on table 12 when she heard the excited whispers spreading through the restaurant. The infamous food critic, Mr. Wong, had arrived with his entourage of social media influencers, all dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached their table. Mr. Wong's reviews could make or break a restaurant, and everyone knew he enjoyed filming his dining experiences for his millions of followers. "Good evening." May greeted them with a polite bow. "Would you like to start with our wine selection?" The next hour passed in a blur of precise movements and careful attention. Everything was going smoothly until she reached for the sauce boat containing the restaurant's signature truffle cream. The porcelain vessel slipped ever so slightly in her grip, causing a few drops to land on the pristine white tablecloth, not on anyone's clothes, just the cloth itself. "Oh my God, are you seeing this?" One of the influencers immediately raised her phone, recording May's mortified expression. Mr. Wong's face twisted into an exaggerated look of disgust. "This is what passes for service at a supposedly high-end establishment," he announced loudly, making sure his voice carried across the dining room. First, the bread was 2 degrees too cold, and now this catastrophe. May's throat tightened as she quickly grabbed a clean napkin to dab at the small spots. "I sincerely apologize, sir. Let me replace the tablecloth immediately." But Mr. Wong wasn't finished. He stood up, his camera phone pointed directly at her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to his live stream viewers, "this is why I always say Manhattan's dining scene is going downhill. Look at this server, completely untrained, totally unsuitable for fine dining. I wouldn't let her serve at a hot dog stand." The other diners were staring now. Some looked away uncomfortably, while others pulled out their own phones to capture the moment. Mai felt her cheeks burning, but she maintained her composure, years of practice helping her keep her back straight and her expression neutral. Just then, her manager, Mr. Lee, rushed over. Mai felt a flicker of hope. Surely he would defend his employee. Instead, he bowed repeatedly to Mr. Wong. "Please accept our deepest apologies. This server will be disciplined appropriately. Your entire meal tonight will be complimentary." The rest of the evening passed in a fog. Mai could hear snippets of conversations as she moved between tables. "Isn't that the girl from the video? It's already got 100,000 views. Did you see how she almost ruined his suit?" She wanted to protest. The sauce hadn't gone anywhere near his suit, but she kept quiet, continuing her duties with mechanical precision. After the last guest left, Mr. Lee called her into his office. The fluorescent lights made his frown look even harsher. "May, this is a serious problem. That video is going viral in the restaurant community. We can't afford this kind of publicity." He slid a paper across his desk. "You're on probation. One more mistake, and we'll have to let you go." She clutched the probation notice, thinking of her grandmother's medical bills and her tuition payments. "I understand, sir," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "It won't happen again." Walking home that night, Mai passed several street musicians in the subway. Usually, their music would lift her spirits, but tonight each note felt like a reminder of how far she was from her dreams. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from coworkers sharing links to the video, some offering sympathy, others barely concealing their amusement at her humiliation. In her tiny apartment, she found her grandmother asleep in her wheelchair, a half-finished puzzle on the table before her. Mai quietly wheeled her to bed, tucked her in, and finally allowed herself to cry. Not loud sobs, just silent tears as she sat at her small electronic keyboard, her fingers resting motionless on the keys for the first time in years. The incident replayed in her mind, the sauce drops, the phones recording her shame, Mr. Wong's cruel words, her manager's betrayal. But as she wiped her eyes and looked at her grandmother's peaceful sleeping face, she knew she couldn't give up. Tomorrow would be another day at Le Petit Jardin, another chance to prove herself. If only she could figure out how. The clock had just struck midnight at Le Petit Jardin, and May was alone in the dim dining room, wiping down the last of the tables. The viral video of her mishap had been circulating for 3 days now, and she could still feel the weight of judgmental stares from her coworkers. Even regular customers who used to greet her warmly now whispered behind their menus when she approached. Tonight's shift had been particularly difficult. The regular pianist had called in sick, leaving the beautiful grand piano in the corner, silent and untouched. All evening, Mai had noticed how the atmosphere felt different without the usual classical music floating through the air. The dining room seemed emptier somehow, despite being fully booked. As she gathered the last of the wine glasses onto her tray, her eyes kept drifting to the piano. In the quiet of the empty restaurant, it seemed to call to her. The polished black surface gleamed under the dim lights, and May found herself walking toward it, almost in a trance. She set down her cleaning supplies and gently lifted the piano's lid. Her fingers trembled slightly as they hovered over the keys. It had been so long since she touched a real grand piano. Her little electronic keyboard at home couldn't compare to this masterpiece of craftsmanship. Just one piece, she whispered to herself, glancing around the empty restaurant. The security cameras were focused on the entrance and cash registers, not this corner. Taking a deep breath, she sat down on the bench, adjusting it to the right height, just as her piano teacher had taught her years ago. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9 No. 2 floated through the air, tentative at first, like a bird testing its wings. But as May closed her eyes and let her fingers dance across the keys, all her frustrations from the past few days began to melt away. The melody grew stronger, more confident, filling the space with emotions she couldn't express in words. Her body swayed gently with the music as she poured everything into the piece. Her grandmother's struggle with illness, the long hours of working double shifts, the humiliation of the viral video, and underneath it all, her unwavering dream of becoming a professional musician. The piano responded to her touch as if it understood her story, each note ringing clear and true in the quiet restaurant. Lost in the music, Mai didn't hear the back door open. She didn't notice the young man who had returned to retrieve his forgotten wallet freeze in his tracks, his eyes widening as he listened to her play. He stood in the shadows, completely still, afraid that any movement might break the spell. As Mai reached the final measures of the piece, letting the last notes fade away like a gentle sigh, she heard a sound that made her heart stop. Applause. She spun around on the bench, nearly losing her balance, to find the owner's son standing there with an expression of complete amazement on his face. I'm so sorry, May stammered, quickly standing up and bowing deeply. I know I shouldn't have touched the piano. I was just finishing my cleaning duties and Her voice trailed off as she realized this could be the final mistake that would cost her job. But the young man was shaking his head, still staring at her with wonderment. That was incredible, he said softly. How long have you been playing? May clutched her cleaning rag like a lifeline. Since I was 6, she admitted. My grandmother taught piano before she got sick. She saved every penny to pay for my lessons. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. I've heard professional pianists play that piece in concert halls, he said, but none of them captured the emotion quite like you just did. He paused, studying her face. You're the server from the viral video, aren't you? May's cheeks burned with shame, but she nodded. To her surprise, a smile spread across his face. I think, he said slowly, we might have an opportunity here. One that could change everything, for both you and Le Petit Jardin. Standing there in her waitress uniform, still holding her cleaning rag, Mai felt a tiny spark of hope flicker to life in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, her grandmother had been right all along. Sometimes the darkest moments could lead to the brightest opportunities. The owner's son, who introduced himself as Jin, pulled up a chair while Mai nervously perched on the piano bench. The empty restaurant felt different now, like a stage waiting for a performance rather than just a room that needed cleaning. I'm a music producer, Jin explained, his eyes still bright with excitement. And what I just heard, that's exactly what this restaurant needs. Not just someone playing background music, but real emotion, true artistry. He leaned forward, hands clasped. "How would you feel about becoming our evening pianist?" May's heart skipped a beat, but anxiety quickly followed. "But sir, I'm just a server. After what happened with Mr. Wong's video." She twisted the cleaning cloth in her hands, remembering the humiliation. Jin waved his hand dismissively. "That video showed one small accident. What I just witnessed showed who you really are." He gestured toward the piano. "Look, here's what I'm thinking. You continue your regular serving duties during lunch, but in the evenings, you become our featured pianist." The proposition hung in the air between them. May's mind raced with possibilities and problems. "I don't know," she said softly. "Playing alone in my apartment is one thing, but in front of all these people. The thought of those judging eyes, those phones ready to record any mistake, made her stomach twist." "You're afraid," Jin observed, not unkindly. "After what happened, I understand. But fear can be overcome. Trust me, I've worked with many artists." He paused, studying her face. "Tell me about your grandmother, the one who taught you to play." May's expression softened at the mention of her grandmother. "She was once a concert pianist in Hong Kong," she shared, her voice growing stronger. "Even now, when her hands are too stiff to play, she sits beside me while I practice, humming along to every piece." And what would she say about this opportunity? The question hit home. Meg could picture her grandmother's face, could hear her voice saying what she'd always taught. "Music is the language of courage, little one. When you play from your heart, people will listen." Jin seemed to sense her wavering. "Let me help you," he offered. "We'll start small, maybe just one or two pieces during the quiet dinner hours. I'll help you choose the music, work on your stage presence. We can even pick pieces that show off your strengths while you build confidence." May's fingers unconsciously moved across the piano keys, not pressing down, just feeling their smooth surface. The other staff, they already think I'm not good enough to serve here. "Then show them who you really are," Jin urged. "Not just someone who carries plates, but an artist who can move people's hearts." Besides, he added with a slight smile, "Imagine Mr. Wong's face when he realizes the server he mocked is actually a brilliant pianist." That image brought an unexpected smile to May's face. She thought about her grandmother's medical bills, her tuition at Juilliard's evening program, her dreams of becoming a professional musician. Maybe this was the universe offering her a chance, not just to prove herself, but to transform her humiliation into something beautiful. She started hesitantly, "If I say yes, could I practice here sometimes? My keyboard at home, the neighbors complain about the noise, even with headphones." Jin's face lit up, recognizing her question as the first step toward acceptance. "The restaurant is yours every morning before we open," he promised. "And I'll talk to my father about adjusting your schedule to give you time to prepare." Maya looked around the dining room, seeing it through new eyes. The tables she usually served would become her audience. The corner where she often stood to check on her tables would become her stage. It was terrifying and thrilling. "Okay," she whispered, then cleared her throat and said more firmly, "Okay, I'll do it." Jin stood up, extending his hand. "Welcome to your second act, May. Tomorrow, we start turning this viral video story into something nobody will ever forget, but for all the right reasons." As they shook hands, Mai felt something shift inside her. The weight of humiliation began to lift, replaced by the flutter of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time since Mr. Wong's video, she felt ready to face them, one note at a time. The first few nights were the hardest. May's hands would shake every time she approached the piano, and the whispers from regular customers seemed to grow louder. "Isn't that the clumsy waitress?" they'd murmur. But as soon as her fingers touched the keys, something magical would happen. The whispers would fade away, replaced by the gentle notes of classical pieces floating through the air. Jin kept his promise about helping her. Every morning before the restaurant opened, he'd sit with her, suggesting pieces that would complement different parts of the evening. During the early dinner service, play something light, he'd advise. Save the emotional pieces for later, when the wine has flowing and people are more receptive. Slowly but surely, May found her rhythm. During lunch, she'd serve tables with her usual grace, but now there was a new confidence in her step. The other servers noticed the change, especially when regular customers began requesting to be seated near the piano during evening service. One evening, an elderly couple celebrated their 50th anniversary at the restaurant. Between courses, the husband approached the piano. "My wife and I had our first dance to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata," he said softly. "Would you happen to know it?" May smiled, her fingers already finding the familiar keys. As she played, she watched the couple hold hands across their table, tears glistening in their eyes. That night, she realized her music wasn't just background noise, it was becoming part of people's precious memories. The restaurant's atmosphere began to change. The usual clinking of cutlery and murmur of conversation now blended with May's music to create something extraordinary. Even the kitchen staff would sometimes pause in their work, listening as she played pieces that reminded them of home. Her grandmother visited one evening, wheeled to a special table near the piano by her nurse. May had prepared a surprise, a traditional Chinese piece her grandmother had taught her years ago. As she played, she could hear her grandmother's quiet humming accompanying the melody, just like during their practice sessions at home. Word spread through Manhattan's dining scene of the talented pianist at Le Petit Jardin. Guests began making reservations specifically for evenings when May would be playing. The restaurant's social media pages filled with clips of her performances, slowly but surely burying the old viral video of her serving mishap. Then one quiet Tuesday evening, May's heart nearly stopped. Mr. Wong, the food critic who had humiliated her, walked in with his usual entourage of influencers. But this time, he didn't recognize the elegant figure at the piano, her posture perfect as she played Chopin's Waltz in A minor. During his meal, Mr. Wong pulled out his phone, but not to criticize. Instead, he recorded a short video of the performance. "Le Petit Jardin has outdone itself," he wrote on his blog later that night. "Their mysterious new pianist transforms simple dinner music into an unforgettable experience. This hidden gem deserves recognition." May saved a screenshot of that review, sending it to her grandmother with a heart emoji. The next morning, as she practiced before opening hours, Jin found her smiling at the piano. "I saw the review," he said, leaning against the instrument. "How does it feel?" She thought for a moment, her fingers lightly tracing the keys. "It feels like finding my voice," she replied. "Like everything that happened before was just preparing me for this moment." Jin nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You know he'll eventually realize who you are," he warned gently. Mai straightened her back, the morning sun streaming through the windows catching the subtle highlights in her hair. "Let him realize," she said with quiet determination. "I'm not the same person he filmed that day. I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be." As the first staff members began arriving for the day, May shifted smoothly from pianist back to server, her movements now carrying the same grace and confidence she showed at the piano. The viral video that once threatened to destroy her had instead sparked a transformation that no one, not even she, had expected. And this was just the beginning. Saturday evenings at Le Petit Jardin were always special, but this particular night felt different. The dining room buzzed with energy as guests filled every table, many having made reservations weeks in advance to hear the restaurant's now famous pianist. What nobody knew was that Mr. Wong had booked a table for 8, planning to do a full review of the restaurant's evening entertainment. May was serving her last lunch table when she overheard the hostess confirming Mr. Wong's reservation. Her stomach tightened, but she didn't feel the same fear as before. These past weeks of playing had given her something more valuable than just confidence. They had given her purpose. As evening approached, May changed from her server's uniform into the elegant black dress Jin had suggested for her performances. Her grandmother's old jade pendant hung at her throat, a reminder of everything that had brought her to this moment. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized the poised young woman who looked back at her. The dinner service began normally. Mai played her usual selection of light classical pieces, her music weaving through the conversations and laughter that filled the room. Then, at exactly 8 p.m., Mr. Wang arrived with his entourage, all of them dressed to impress and phones already in hand. From her place at the piano, May could see the exact moment Mr. Wang recognized her. His eyes widened, then narrowed as he whispered to his companions. Soon, all of them were staring at her, phones discreetly recording. She could read their lips. It's the clumsy waitress. Instead of shrinking away, Mai straightened her back and continued playing, her fingers dancing across the keys with even more determination. The piece she was playing, a gentle Mozart sonata, came to an end, and the dining room filled with warm applause. Mr. Wang stood up, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "Well, well," he said loudly, "isn't this an interesting development? The waitress who couldn't handle a sauce boat now pretends to be a concert pianist. Tell me, everyone," he turned to address the other diners, "would you trust your evening's entertainment to someone who went viral for incompetence?" The room fell silent. Phones emerged from purses and pockets, ready to capture another viral moment. May's fingers hovered over the keys as her heart pounded. Then she remembered her grandmother's words. Music speaks louder than any critic. Rising from the piano bench, Mai faced the room. Her voice was quiet but clear. 3 months ago, Mr. Wang, you filmed me at my lowest moment, she said. You made me go viral as a clumsy server, but that video only showed one small part of who I am. She gestured to the piano. This is who I've always been. A musician who serves tables to support her sick grandmother and pay for her studies at Juilliard. Every spill, every mistake, every moment of humiliation was just part of my journey to this stage. Without waiting for a response, Mai sat back down at the piano. Her fingers found the keys and the powerful opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the room. This wasn't background dinner music. This was her story, told through one of the most challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. The room fell completely silent except for her music. Even the kitchen staff emerged to listen, standing in doorways with tears in their eyes. Mai poured everything into the piece, her struggles, her dreams, her determination. Her grandmother's pendant seemed to grow warm against her skin as she played, as if carrying the strength of generations of women who had fought for their dreams. Mr. Wang remained standing, his phone still raised, but now his face showed something different, not mockery, but amazement. Other diners had put their phones down, too caught up in the music to think about recording. One of the influencers in Mr. Wang's group wiped away tears. As Mai reached the piece's climactic moment, her fingers flying across the keys with passionate precision, she felt something shift in the room. This wasn't just about proving Mr. Wang wrong anymore. This was about showing everyone, including herself, that sometimes life's greatest humiliations can become its most powerful transformations. The final notes rang out, hanging in the air like stars. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the entire restaurant erupted in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very walls. In that moment, Mai knew. The viral video that had nearly broken her had instead set her free. The video of May's performance spread across social media like wildfire, but this time for all the right reasons. Waitress turned pianist stuns food critic became the new viral sensation. Clips of her playing Rachmaninoff racked up millions of views, with comments pouring in from around the world. The morning after her confrontation with Mr. Wang, Mai arrived at Le Petit Jardin to find a small crowd gathered outside. Some were aspiring musicians, others were people who had been bullied online. All of them wanted to thank her for showing that a viral moment of shame didn't have to define someone's life. Inside the restaurant, things had changed too. The other servers who had once whispered behind her back now greeted her with genuine smiles. The chef, a usually stern man, had tears in his eyes as he handed her a specially prepared breakfast. "My mother was a pianist, too," he said softly. "She would have been proud to see what you did last night." Later that morning, Mr. Wong's new article appeared online. "An apology and a discovery at Le Petit Jardin," the headline read. His words were humble and honest. "Last night, I was taught the most important lesson of my career. In our rush to create viral content, we sometimes forget the human beings behind our cameras. I witnessed not just extraordinary musical talent, but the triumph of dignity over humiliation." The restaurant's owner called a staff meeting. Standing beside his son Jin, he announced that May would now be officially employed as both server and featured pianist. "This restaurant has always been about more than just food," he said. "Thanks to May, it's now about second chances and following your dreams too." May's grandmother sat in her wheelchair near the piano during the evening service, her eyes shining with pride. Regular customers would stop by to greet her, knowing she was the one who had first placed her granddaughter's small hands on piano keys many years ago. Some even requested the traditional Chinese pieces that grandmother and granddaughter had practiced together in their tiny apartment. One evening, a young girl dining with her parents approached the piano between songs. "I wanted to quit my piano lessons," she confessed. "But after seeing your video, I'm going to keep trying." May smiled, remembering her own moments of doubt, and invited the girl to sit beside her on the bench while she played. The income from her dual role at the restaurant helped Mai finally move her grandmother to a better apartment, one with enough space for a small upright piano. On her days off, she would still practice for hours, but now with a new goal, she had been invited to perform at several small concerts around the city. Jin continued to mentor her, helping her balance her serving duties with her growing musical career. "You've changed this place," he told her one quiet afternoon. "People don't just come here to eat anymore. They come here to believe in something." The original viral video that had once caused May so much pain gradually faded into obscurity, buried under countless new videos of her performances. But she kept a copy of it on her phone, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as proof of how far she had come. 1 year to the day after the sauce boat incident, May organized a special evening at Le Petit Jardin. She invited aspiring musicians who worked in the service industry to perform alongside her. The event sold out within hours, and the restaurant buzzed with dreams being born. As she prepared to play that night, May caught her reflection in the polished surface of the piano. She saw more than just a server or a pianist. She saw someone who had turned embarrassment into excellence, criticism into applause, and fear into triumph. Her grandmother reached out and squeezed her hand before she began to play. No words were needed between them. They both knew that sometimes life's most beautiful melodies come from its most difficult moments. And as May's fingers touched the keys, filling the restaurant with music once again, she knew that this wasn't just a happy ending. It was a beautiful beginning.